Hello, I'm Stephen Harriet, our Director of Youth and Families here at Covenant. Today we're going to be looking at our Child Safe Policy. The purpose of our Child Safe Policy is not just to look through this big packet and learn about all the words and all the letters that it says and follow it to the letter. The purpose is to keep both children, youth, and our leaders safe. And not just safe in a physical way, although that is great, but safe spiritually. And so we're going to start off just looking at the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verse 14 and 16. Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. And he took the children in his arms, and he put his hands on them, and he blessed them. We as leaders have an awesome responsibility of teaching God's word to the least of these. And so we need to just handle that with the responsibility it entails. You should have a copy of the policy in front of you, and so I would just encourage you to turn those pages as we go through it, and then there will be a time for questions after this. Looking first, again, the purpose is to shine light in all areas of our ministry with children and youth. And the best example of that is the conversation about child safety should just be ongoing. It's not a one and done video. It's not a one and done session. And so what I would recommend is the example I give is if you walk into a situation and you hear the tail end of a conversation and something about it just leaves you feeling a little uncomfortable. We want you to ask questions. We want you to follow up, be it with youth or adults. Again, that's that culture of light. Oftentimes you'll catch that tail end of the situation, and once you've had a chance to talk about it further, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense. Thank you. And if the follow-up does leave you feeling more uncomfortable, that's an opportunity to seek out a director or to seek out an elder and to follow up more thoroughly. Looking at this, that's kind of our purpose. No one policy can be the perfect fail-safe, but a community of believers is what we have, and that's what we're seeking to do. The next section is looking at these definitions. I would draw your attention just so that we're all using the same language. A couple of them I would like to just draw your attention to is the youth section. A youth is anyone in our youth ministry, and so it doesn't matter if they're 19 years old and just graduated high school. Until they exit our youth group, we consider them a youth for the purposes of our policy. Another section would be a duly constituted authority. That's anything like the police department or DHR or any legal entity would be considered a duly constituted authority. And so yes, now we'll look into some of the other sections. The next section just goes over the different classifications of our leadership, working with children. I would just ask that you look at each one and find out which one you fall under. The biggest differences are if you are a paid employee, you have gone through everything. If you are a volunteer leader and an assistant leader, the difference there is a completed background check. All of these circumstances would, again, be subject to the director of the different areas that you will be volunteering in. All right, now we're going to be looking at Section 2. The first part of Section 2 is the two leaders policy. Wherever possible, we want to have two adult leaders. That's safer for the children, safer for us. One leader would at least have to be background checked, and one could just be child safe trained in those circumstances. With this, we realize that that's not always possible. And so that goes into the one leader policy. From there, this would come into effect even if you had two leaders and one had to step out to go monitor students in the restroom or walk with some students to a different part of the building or anything like that. But again, what's happening when we have a one leader is it's either for a very short period of time and then the other adult leader will be coming back, or if it's in a Sunday school setting or some other similar type setting, you would have different leaders in different classrooms teaching small groups, and then you would have maybe a director or another child safe trained leader just monitoring the halls, walking down, spot checking each group to make sure that everything's okay. One of the good things just practices with this is leave doors open, have access to windows to where people could look in. In other words, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy to keep everyone safe. Looking down, children in diapers and toilet training. Obviously, this situation really doesn't apply to most of our groups. Our nursery workers are all trained in this or hired for this purpose and have background checks. No one that has not had a background check can change diapers. With this policy, it also applies to anyone that is toilet training in that process. We also just encourage parents, whenever possible, to take care of their own children's needs in this area. Looking at overnight activities, this is generally within our youth groups. We're following all our policies within this manual. We're going to make every reasonable effort to get specific places where, if we're in a hotel where we have adjoining rooms, and we can have those open, and to, again, just create more openness, more light in the situation. In areas where we're in different buildings and everything, we're going to try and have a girls area and a guys area and things like that, and then have leaders within each area. Following our rule of two. When it comes to driving, 2 leaders in a car, where if that's the only vehicle used, again, 1 background checked. The other thing, sometimes, especially in our youth group, if we have a lot of youth involved, we would be able to caravan, and that's where our leaders would be in different vehicles, but staying within sight of each other, and each vehicle would have youth, where every youth has a seatbelt. Looking again into this, youth are not allowed to drive other youth or children unless parental consent is given for everyone that's in the vehicle. And so that is kind of on a case-by-case basis. All children 5th grade and under have to sit in the back seat unless, again, their parent is a driver and can give them permission to be in that front seat. Within town activities, it doesn't matter if we leave church premises. All of our policies must be followed for any church activity, even if it's off-site. Out of town activities, it's the same thing. We do have attachments included in this document to be filled out by parents to give parental consent and everything like that. But our policies still have to be followed in all out of town activities. Looking at prohibited behavior, that last point in this section, we would hope that it goes without saying, but we cannot threaten or inflict any physical harm on any child or youth. No verbal outbursts. In other words, off-color jokes, anything like that. No belittling. No commenting on anything in a sexual way. We really want our conversation to be above reproach. Engaging in any kind of anything that has just any kind of sexual connotation is just not allowed. The only other thing I want to look at, I want to go back to the one-on-one setting. With that, sometimes, especially in our youth group, a student might want to talk with a leader that they've developed a relationship with, as far as just within the youth group. I don't mean anything huge and serious. What I generally talk about is maybe a youth has broken up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and they just want to talk for a few minutes. Again, nothing huge, but they don't want to talk within a group setting. A lot of times this kind of happens on a Sunday night or a Wednesday night, and that leader, they might just take a walk away from the group. They're still within sight of other leaders and the group, but just kind of talking about that in a brief way. If a longer conversation needs to happen or anything, we generally schedule that with parents or let parents know that something like that is happening. And again, while one person might be doing the talking, there's another adult that would know about it, open windows, open door policies, and things like that. Those kinds of situations are very rare, but we thought for the purposes of just spiritual ministry and teaching people about Christ, sometimes a group setting is not conducive for those conversations, and so we have allowed for those, but under a more strict guidelines, so that again, we're keeping the leaders safe and we're keeping the youth safe. All right, the next section involves reporting abuse, and that is anytime there is an issue, who do you talk to and what do you say? Looking through this, we're going to look at first off at just mandatory reporting. Anyone who's a member of the clergy, a teacher in a school system or anything like that, or healthcare workers or daycare workers, they are mandatory reporters, which means it's against the law if they know of something and they don't report. One of the things we encourage here at Covenant, though, is anyone can report. There's no basis on who can and can't. Anyone that has a feeling that there is something going on, be it neglect or any kind of abuse, we encourage you to report. And the numbers are in this manual for you to follow to contact DHR. With that said, anything that's observed or reported, we're going to take the necessary steps with that. One of the things we ask is that the director of each area is definitely notified of what's going on, and that's mainly because if there is something ongoing, these students are not just in one particular aspect of ministry. Sometimes it goes into others, and so we might need to take additional steps to, again, maintain safety of all. With all of this, if there's ever an allegation on a director or anything like that, you can go to any session member or any pastor at the church and definitely make that. We want clear lines of communications at all leadership levels. Looking through that, we have different reports and attachments that go through this that can help through this process. If you are making a DHR call and you have never done that before, they're going to ask specific questions. And so if you can think through what they're going to ask and have that information, it makes that process a lot easier. The other thing is we encourage that all reports are written down, because after a week we might need to revisit or follow up. And if you haven't written down some of the details, our memories can sometimes change, and so having it written down, having a written record will help keep things consistent and make sure we can follow up in the best manner possible. With this also goes into the fact that sometimes people don't want to report because they feel how it's going to come back on them. All of these things are confidential, and so those things will be kept confidential. Looking at the media, if anything does happen and the media is asking questions, it's our church's policy to have a designated spokesperson. A lot of times that will be the pastor or someone that the session has designated to be our spokesperson. Again, not to hide things, but to keep things consistent and to make sure the person with relevant information is the one giving that information that is consistent with the safety of the child and just confidentiality. If you are making a good faith report, even if it proves false, you're acting in good faith, and so you are protected by the law, and that is mentioned. As far as other things that might need to be reported, just injuries, playground injury. We have different forms in here that can be filled out. So again, we can make sure parents know what happened, how it happened, and follow through. When we talk about these, it's not, a child got a paper cut and we gave them a Band-Aid. We're talking more serious injuries that actually requires a conversation with parents and possibly a doctor's visit, or, if need be, transport to a hospital for, like a broken arm or something like that. Looking at our training, we will train annually. So once a year, everybody involved in any kind of children's ministry or youth ministry will be trained in this policy. Amendments of this policy can happen and will happen because, again, this is not just a static document that is a one and done. We're always trying to find out better ways to keep our leaders and our children safe. And so amendments will be made to this policy, and the drafts and everything will go through there, and everything will be approved through our session. I would like you to just take a moment and look through some of the attachments and the different forms and everything and how they would be used. Other than that, now is a great time to ask questions of any of our directors or our elders in these particular areas of ministry. But again, the most important process of keeping our children safe is not just necessarily a document on paper, but a constant conversation, constant openness, and constant light shed on all areas of ministry. Thank you very much.